Okay, so as you can see, there's Q&A. So participants are going to be able to submit questions through there. Open is going to be where the questions that people have, you have to mention that on the chat that you can answer questions through the Q&A button. You can ask questions through the Q&A button. So questions that attendees ask are going to be unopened. And then once they're answered, you just move them to answered. And if they're dismissed, it's fine. Also, after this is done, they're going to automatically receive a poll. So I don't have to do a SurveyMonkey poll and send it through email, and they're going to ignore it like they did for the first one.
Okay, so.
But that one, neither of us has to worry about it. That's automatic. So yeah, so we have to manage that. Yeah, that's pretty much all the new stuff. So it should be fine.
Okay, let me practice sharing the
Otherwise,
screen.
it's fine. Yeah, go ahead. I'll go to my office over here. My office, I say.
It is your office. Once again, this meeting is going to be recorded. Right now, we are recording the meeting. So yes, if you could go ahead, Teresa, and give us the start.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second training module of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana, R3 Bootcamp. My name is Teresa Lawrence, and I am the CEO of Delta Personnel and Delta Administrative Services. Like myself, many of you tuning in tonight are small business owners looking for answers on how to recover from the economic effects of COVID-19. So our goal with this online seminar is to introduce the tools and ideas that will help you and your businesses rebuild and adapt. Our keynote speaker tonight is a political newcomer, recognized numerous times over the years for his work, in broadcast journalism. His media consulting firm has helped dozens of affluent individuals and businesses refine their messaging for effective communication. In 2016, he was awarded his second Emmy for the 30-minute documentary about the former Saints football player, Steve Gleason. In his current role as Jefferson Parish Councilman at Large, he is already making waves. Earlier this year, he traveled to DC to receive a Congressional Gold Medal, the highest honor bestowed by Congress on a civilian. Without further ado, I give you our councilman and mine, Councilman Scott Walker.
Thank you very much. Just for a point of clarity, that was Steve Gleason receiving the Congressional Gold Medal. It wasn't me, as much as I would like to receive one. I was there because of the stories that I'd done on Steve over the years. We had formed a pretty good relationship, and I was just happy to be there. It's not many times in life that you know a Congressional Gold Medal recipient. So I figured that was an opportunity that I couldn't miss, and I enjoyed being there. And that was right before everything went haywire in the world. So it was one of the last moments of normalcy we had before the pandemic struck. Again, thank you for having me. I'm happy to join you tonight. I wish it were under different circumstances and we could do this type of thing in person, but this is the world we currently live in, unfortunately. Nobody told me when I won this election last October that we'd have to deal with a worldwide pandemic in my first term, and that's been the case for everybody. Our parish president, Cynthia Lee Sheng, has also unfortunately had to shelve a lot of the issues that she talked about during the campaign, just like I have, to deal with COVID. So a lot of the things we talked about, we haven't been able to pursue just yet. And a lot of that includes economic development, businesses, trying to draw new businesses here, business retention in Jefferson Parish. So all that has kind of been kicked down the road a little bit. However, I'm still very high on Jefferson Parish. I'm excited about where this parish is headed. We, contrary to what many people believe, our sales tax revenue in the parish is up about 1.3% from last year. And this past month, it was up. We've only had one month where our sales tax revenue was down year to year, and that was in April. So driven by car dealerships and shopping and home improvement stores, those numbers have maintained. Did I say car dealerships? Car dealerships as well. Those businesses have helped us maintain a robust sales tax base. Jefferson Parish hasn't had to lay off any employees, hasn't had to furlough any employees. We're still operating at 100%, even though for a 3-month stretch, many people weren't at any of our government buildings and weren't doing what they would normally do. People were working from home and trying to survive that way. If you hear a dog bark in the background, that's mine. He's ready to go outside. This year has been interesting, to say the least. I always say there's no playbook for this. We came into office and just had about 10 weeks of normalcy, and then boom, a brand new virus that nobody's ever dealt with before, and nobody had any way to treat it before. So nobody had ever dealt with it at a government level before. So that's what we were charged with. And I think all in all, Jefferson Parish has done a pretty good job in dealing with something nobody's ever had to deal with before. We've had a testing site at the Alario Center and numerous other sites around Jefferson Parish that have been sponsored by other entities like Oster. But the parish has had that Alario Center testing site for quite some time. And that was just a wonderful thing to have at the beginning, because we were doing so much testing. Then it kind of scaled down. And now, unfortunately, testing has gone back up again. And we're seeing a big increase in numbers. Just a few weeks ago, we were averaging around 30, 40 cases a day, 1 or 2 deaths per day. Many days had 0 deaths. But now we're not seeing the death numbers go up yet, thankfully, but we are seeing a big increase in reported cases. And today, I believe, was 186 cases. And we've been in those higher numbers in the past few days. At the beginning of this, obviously, small businesses were struggling. Many small businesses are still struggling. I'm a small business owner, and my business is struggling. We saw many businesses at the beginning adapt. Just some of the ones that I know of, mine in particular. I own a donut shop on Metairie Road, Shipley Donuts, and we don't have a drive-through, unfortunately. And that's cost us a lot of money during this pandemic, because having a drive-through would have been fantastic. At the very beginning, we just had to adapt because nobody wanted to come inside, and we couldn't really have people inside at first. So we did curbside service. We served only glazed donuts for the first few weeks. We're only open on Saturdays and Sundays. And we just boxed up glazed donuts and sold them like that. So they were basically going from the fryer into a box, and nobody had to really deal with anything or touch anything. So it was from the fryer to the consumer, basically. And then after a couple of weeks, we added our chocolate ice donuts to it. And then we opened on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then Thursday through Sunday, and then Wednesday through Sunday, then Tuesday through Sunday is where we are now. We're still closed on Mondays. But my business is still off probably 30 or so percent from what it was pre-pandemic. And a lot of businesses are dealing with the same thing. Some businesses are doing really well, and they've adapted really well during the pandemic. One business that I know of is right across the street from Shipley, Fat Boys Pizza, who donated thousands of pizzas to frontline workers early in the pandemic. And they got a huge buzz going about the spotlight that deserved to be on these frontline workers and people who were really doing the important heroic work at the beginning of this pandemic. So they gave away thousands of pizzas. They have a pizza truck that they used and took that all over the place and served pizza in different parts of the city to help people who were working against this pandemic. And just if anybody happened by, they were there with their pizza truck. Another business that I know of that's started to operate differently lately is Sprout Pediatrics on veterans. It's a regular pediatrician. They have done drive-through flu shot clinics where patients don't have to get out of their cars, and they can just kind of drive in, get their flu shot. The kids are still strapped in. It's easy. The pain doesn't last very long for the kids, and they're out of there before they can even cry. So I think the way that we've seen businesses adapt and do things differently has been rewarding from an entrepreneurial standpoint, because you see what entrepreneurs do best when they are faced with adversity, and they adjust and they just do things differently to survive. You've seen a lot of different businesses that have completely gone to a different business model. I know one business that was an entertainment company. They put on events, and they pivoted their business from that because there were no events in the city of New Orleans to now a company that does a food program and serves food. And that's going to be going through Jefferson Parish in the not too distant future. So it's just a different way of doing things and taking what you have and maximizing that and using what you can do in a different way. Restaurants still are operating at 75%, bars at 25%, and it's tough. It's really tough. As we look ahead to the next year, 2021, God willing, things are going to be a lot better for us in Jefferson Parish and in Louisiana and across the United States. Hopefully this vaccine that could get approval before the end of the year will start to be distributed to the important people on the front lines, the healthcare workers and the first responders and people who really need it. And then it trickles to the rest of the population. Then by spring, we can hopefully see these numbers begin to go down and improve across our community. And at that point, hopefully we can get back to business and get everybody back to 100% and do what we need to do as a community. I know there are so many business owners I talk to who are ready to be back to 100%. And, even if that means continuing to wear masks for a little while, they want to get back to 100%. And it doesn't matter what side of the political argument you're on. Some people are against masks 100%, say it's fake, the virus is fake, everything is stripping their civil liberties and their rights, all the way to the people who won't leave a house without a mask. So I think if we land somewhere in between, we're in a pretty good spot. I personally hate wearing the mask, but understand what we have to do as a community. And people say, why aren't the masks working? Why aren't they working? Look at our numbers going up. But I think the answer can be, let's look at where they are working. They're working in schools right now because those places aren't super spreader places. The people who are contracting coronavirus in schools really aren't contracting it in schools from what we've seen. They're getting it from somewhere else, from their home, and then bringing it back to school. And then that's when they have to quarantine. So I believe the masks do work, and there's scientific data behind it that shows that masks do work. And I really think we don't have to look any farther than our schools, because a lot of people predicted doomsday when the schools went back in and said, oh, all these students are going to spread it all over the place. They're going to take it home to their parents and grandparents. The deaths are going to increase. We haven't seen that happen, thank goodness, in this first half of the school year. Will it get worse with the holidays here? Could possibly. I hope it doesn't. I hope we continue to see some of the same results that we've seen so far. But I think the masks do work. And if that's what we need to do as a society to continue to function and continue to come back to business 100%, then let's wear some masks until we don't have to anymore, until it's safe not to. It is an inconvenience, but if that's what it takes to get our business community back up and running, and if that's what it takes for people to be confident and secure going inside of a business and patronizing a business, then let's do it. You know, I know that people still don't come into my business because they don't want to come in and be around other people yet, even though we do require masks before they come inside. And I want to believe that humanity and society will do the right thing and help us get through this. But I know there's fatigue. There's coronavirus fatigue, and people are tired of it and want to move on. Unfortunately, the virus doesn't care about how we feel and how tired of it we are. It's going to be here for a little while longer, and we've, I think, learned to live with it to a certain extent, but we need to do it a little while longer. It's been 9 months. Let's give it another 4 or 5 and see what happens, and hopefully we come out better on the other side. Going into next year, as I was saying, I hope as we get back to business, we as a council in Jefferson Parish and we as a parish can do some things to help some of our businesses. There aren't any solid lockdown plans yet because I think everything is in flux and always changing. But I know specifically my council office, unlike the other council offices, the district offices have district improvement funds, they're called. So districts 1 through 5 can use their district improvement funds to do things within their district at their discretion, whatever they want to spend the money on. The 2 at-large council offices, my office and Ricky Template's office, have money dedicated that comes from our economic development fund in the parish. And that money is dedicated to economic development. Strictly, we can't use it for anything else other than economic development. So we've been toying with different scenarios and different ideas in my office about how next year we can use some of this money, which is $200,000 a year in my office. The district offices get a lot more money. They average probably $800,000 or $1 million, or even some get a little bit more. But this is the first year that the at-large offices have had money, so we're happy with what we can get. But we haven't used that money so far this year, and it rolls over. So next year, assuming we don't spend much the rest of this year, we'll have $400,000 in my office, the 200 from this year and the 200 from next year. And we really want to identify some ways that we can inject some of that money into our business community and kind of give them the boost that they may need. And we still don't know how we're going to do it. We've looked at a number of different ideas, and we've had some brainstorming sessions to just try and figure it out. So, you know, every time I talk to a business group, I say, I welcome ideas. I welcome your brainstorming, and my door is always open. My email inbox is always receiving. You can always get me at scottwalker@jeffparish.net. I see all the emails. My staff sees the emails that go to that address, and we really value the input from our business community. Talked to the Jefferson Chamber. We've talked to the Jefferson Business Council. We've talked to as many people as we can, and we have a meeting scheduled with Tim Coulon before too long to talk about this economic development fund. And I've talked to Jerry Bologna, we've talked to Todd Murphy, and we've tried to engage them and look at different ways that we can bring the business community in to try and come up with a smart, sensible way to spend some of this money to help our businesses, because small businesses are the backbone of our community in Jefferson Parish. It's the backbone of any community. People who work hard to do great things in their community, the entrepreneurs who take chances, the people who open new businesses during this time in a pandemic are really the ones that drive our community. Jefferson Parish is one of the main economic drivers for the state of Louisiana. And we're not doing a lot of driving as a parish right now because of the pandemic. And we need Orleans Parish. We need Jefferson Parish at full strength to help the rest of our state to prosper as we move to the other side of this pandemic. I'm bullish on Jefferson Parish. Like I said at the beginning, I think we're headed in the right direction. And I really do believe that we have good leadership and a good structure around us to make sure that we come out of this on the other side and we can really do some good things in 2021 and beyond. And hopefully things calm down just a little bit. Seems like at every corner there's something different. First we have the pandemic, then we have 8 storms that we're in the cone in, and now, knock on wood, we can take a breath for a minute, it seems, as we get into the holidays, but I don't even want to jinx myself by saying that. But hopefully 2021 offers us some hope and some change and a positive direction for our business community. And with that, I can take any questions that you all may have.
For the attendees, like I said, if you have any questions, just go ahead and click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we will relay them to to Mr. Scott Walker. And sorry. So if there are any questions, just go ahead. If not, then I will let Teresa take over so that she can introduce our she can introduce Joanne Lawrence.
I do have to leave in 2 or 3 minutes, so to take my son to basketball right after 5:30. So if there are questions, now's the time, because I won't be here later.
Yes. We appreciate your time.
But thank you all for having me. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And I mean it when I say reach out to me, email, give me your ideas, and let me know what you all are thinking, and
we're very thankful
how we can do this.
Absolutely. And I think it's a collaborative effort of all our resources that you have been able to pull together to make things ahead of much better standing than other parishes. And you should be very proud of Jefferson. So we're very thankful that you had time with us tonight. And,
we're trying. Let's just not talk about Mardi Gras yet.
No.
That's a whole different controversial subject.
Yeah, we don't have that much tonight. Again, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And have a great evening. I know you have children and you've got to take everything. So I'm a mom, so I get it.
You all too. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker has over 41 years of service with the federal government. Her extensive experience has provided her with an impressive level of expertise in business development, concentrating and procurement assistance to small businesses in Louisiana. Frequently called upon to training initiatives across the country, she has worked on several standard operating procedures, manuals in all areas of small business development. Today, she serves as Deputy District Director for the Louisiana District Office of the U.S. Small Business Administration. I don't know if anyone on this call does not know Ms. Joanne Lawrence, but let me tell you, she is a fireball, and no one cares more about small businesses than Joanne. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce a great friend and a person that I admire very much, Joanne Lawrence.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Teresa, for that introduction. When I hear that 40 years, it just takes me so far back. So I hope that through this event and others that those on the line may participate in with me, that they can feel the passion that I have for small businesses. And I'm so thankful to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana for affording me this opportunity to serve as the moderator for such valuable events. We want everyone to remember that the goal is to help you as a small business owner, you as one who are contributing to the economy, to develop business strategies to help you overcome where you find yourself now as we deal with COVID-19. So of course, tonight's bootcamp focuses on restoration. So from our speakers, you'll hear strategies for developing long-term plans and strategies for accessing capital and networking opportunities. So our participants tonight are Ms. Carmen Sanda, who is the director of the Greater New Orleans Region Small Business Development Center, and Mr. Bo Kemp, the senior director for Faegre Drinker. Carmen will come to us first. She is, as I mentioned, she is the director of the LSBDC Greater New Orleans and River Region, and she is responsible for the management and operations of a 7-parish regional small business development center. Now, of course, the small business development centers are one of our resource partners. So they receive funding from SBA. So when you think about the SBDCs, you look at them as an extension of the Small Business Administration. Carmen has over 35 years of experience in assisting businesses in achieving growth, profitability, and sustainability, including 15 years of disaster response and recovery. Her areas of specialty include financial management, loan packaging, strategic marketing, managing growth, and risk management. She has been recognized nationally for her expertise and innovations. So in addition to working with small businesses with COVID-19, she worked with businesses in recovering and rebuilding after several hurricanes, including Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, and Isaac. So she has extensive experience that she can share with you today. So now we'll bring to you Ms. Carmen Sanda.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Appreciate the introduction. And just for the record, you may have been with SBA for 41 years, but you and I have been working together for 17. So that takes us back a while too. So who's ever got my slide presentation? I need to have it shared now. Thank you. Okay, well this is, as Joanne said, this is who I am. I'm the director of the Regional Small Business Development Center, and Jefferson Parish is definitely a large part of our market. And Councilman Walker, I really appreciated your thoughts and your comments. And yes, we are opening businesses, believe it or not. But since March, we've been the frontline assistance folks for all the businesses that have been impacted. Next slide, please. Basically, as Joanne said, we're one of the resource partners of the SBA. And basically, to quickly explain, all we do is provide business consultants and assistance to small businesses. The best part is everything is at no charge, absolutely free. That's because the SBA and Louisiana Economic Development and Xavier University of Louisiana pay our salaries. So there's no money to pay us. And what we've been focusing on now is the strategies to adapt and thrive. Scott mentioned several really good ones. And we're also really good at the sources of funding, growth opportunities, accounting, marketing research, leadership, employee management, e-commerce, operational strategies, cybersecurity, website development, e-commerce. I know that sounds like a lot from one center, but we have different consultants that are good at different specialties. And in addition, we've got statewide consultants with expertise in some of these areas. And so the small businesses can access a lot of these different services with us. Next slide, please. As Joanne mentioned, we've had 15 years of disaster response. I think Mike Ricks, who is the district director, made the comment that our center probably has more years of experience in disaster response and recovery than any center in the United States. Not something I really set out to do, but that's what happens. So we do a lot of the disaster preparedness, business resiliency. We have a specialty in culinary and restaurants, seafood, music, commercial fishing, and also an international trade. And we are delivering most of our services remotely, including all of our training right now. Our clients really seem to love it. It's very convenient. It's very time efficient for them. And we've seen a huge increase in our productivity, actually. And like I said, the clients seem to really appreciate it. Next slide. My three topics tonight were targeted reopening strategies, workforce planning, and customer acquisition. And I like Councilman Walker's introduction because he did exactly what my first bullet point is. You have to reimagine your entire business model. I mean, just sit down and reimagine the whole thing. What is it that I'm really doing that is going to be a benefit to my customers? And what do I need to do in order to serve those customers, or in some cases, serve different customers? So you just need to reimagine the whole business model. One of the things we saw with many of our small businesses is that they weren't quite nimble enough to go to, e-commerce and things like that. So one thing we're working with our small businesses on is innovating their websites, strengthening their e-commerce options. It's pretty amazing what people will buy through your website and your e-commerce options, just about everything that you can sell, including services, because you can do that virtually now. We're recommending that people make their delivery and curbside standard practices. I know Councilman Walker mentioned that that's what they were doing, that they have they can't do delivery, but they are doing curbside. And just keep in mind, you're a small business, but loyal customers, particularly in our communities, are very willing to patronize the local business, and they're very willing to pay tips and reasonable delivery charges. And so you don't need to be afraid of that, thinking you can't compete with those bigger businesses. Well, you can when you've got loyal customers or a customer base that you make it very, very easy for them to purchase what you have or do business with you. And that's really the key, making purchasing with you and doing business with you as effortlessly as possible. And that includes, I'm still seeing, while many small businesses were able to go to the contactless payment system, I'm encouraging people to make that a standard practice. And if they weren't quite able to do that, they need to go to that because you don't want to go curbside pickup and then have to give your credit card through the window and wait for them to go run it and come back. That's just very, very inefficient, and sort of defeats the whole purpose of contactless payment. So I really encourage the small businesses to really look into doing that and making that a standard practice. And the other tip I would get on reopening is promote and visually demonstrate your safety practices. And what do I mean by that? You need to make sure that in your promotions, you're really talking about what you do to keep your business safe and make it safe for people to come visit you if they choose to do that. And when I say visually demonstrate, if you've got customers coming in to your place of business, be visible about how you're cleaning things and sanitizing. If people can see you doing it, that gives them a little bit more assurance that that place is really safe. I know when I walk into a business, when I see someone sanitizing, I go, "Ooh, they're really good about this, or they're really serious about this." And so I've been recommending these kinds of things for the targeted reopening. Starting with the Reimagine that business model. Make sure your website's up to par. Make sure you've got good e-commerce options and things like that. And these are all the kinds of things that the SBDC can help you with. I've had many clients say, "Well, I'm not really computer. I don't know that much about my website," or things like that. That's where the SBDC consultants can help you. I just met with a client the other day and did a handoff to our website consultant. And we're going to be able to redevelop her website and strengthen the e-commerce so that she will be able to have a much better e-commerce situation and sell more of the items in her store. She's in a location where she has been surviving on foot traffic for many, many years, and that's just not going to work right now. It's not going to work for a really long time. So, be sure to reach out to the SBDC for any of these things. The next topic I had was workforce planning. Again, now that you've reimagined your business model, okay, take stock of your current employees. Some of the folks that you have with you actually have more skills than you think they have, more talents than you think they have, and more interests. They're just not utilizing them at your place of business. And I know, Teresa, you would probably agree with me on that, being Delta personnel, that a lot of times the employers really don't understand the skill sets and talents and interests that their current employees have that want to stay with them and want to be loyal. So I would encourage you to revisit those skills, talents, and interests, because the people who are working for you right now and being loyal are your best resource for that. And with your reimagined strategies, maybe there is new talent that's needed. And so you again, you might want to, again, we can help you with that, with the SBDC, but maybe you do need some new talent. The next thing I would tell, what we tell these small businesses when they're doing their workforce planning is, at this point, you may have a new business model. You've got things now that are a little bit more than maybe what you can do. And you want to really identify and delegate those tasks and projects. Who is best? Who can be successful working remote with something like social media posting, handling the website, managing the e-commerce, or other things, paperwork, operations, things like that. And this kind of goes without saying, but just because you can do it as the owner doesn't mean you should be doing it yourself. You've got more than enough to handle in implementing your Reimagine business model and doing business a little bit differently or a lot differently than you have been doing. And so don't try to go it alone. That's what you want to use your employees for. And that's why we suggest you revisit the skills, talents, and interests and re-engage them. And the one topic we hear come up a lot with small businesses, and I know, Teresa, you hear this from your clients as well, is the employees you need to have an open discussion with your employees and train and reinforce the safety practices that they need to adhere to. When I say open discussion, you need to hear about what they're feeling and what their concerns are and what would help them feel safe in your business and safe working there. It's very, very important to have that open communication and some candid discussion about what is it that you can do to make sure that the employees are feeling safe and secure working in your business, particularly if they're going to be on site at the business. And then lots and lots of training and reinforcing of those safety practices, because some of the businesses naturally had a lot of safety practices already in sanitation and things like that, but they need to revisit that. And for some businesses, it wasn't something that they really engaged in every day because perhaps they're just in an office situation and that wasn't something that was done every day. But just having that open discussion and reinforcing and training is a really good way to start the discussion and go about it. Lastly, customer acquisition. One of my favorite topics, customer acquisition. Again, get back to basics. Get back to basics. No matter how long you've been in business, a lot of the small businesses now have, pretty solid customer base, and they've relied on the customers that have been coming in frequently or loyally to their business, and suddenly they're not coming in. Let's get back to basics. Get back to basics. Do you have a customer list? Do you know how to contact your customers? If not, get it updated. Also, now that you've done a reimagining of your business model, revisit your target market. Who are you selling to, and revisit your selling proposition. Maybe your selling proposition has now changed a little bit and you need to revisit that and really clearly more define what that is so you can get the right message to your target market. I loved it that Councilman Walker is really good at that kind of communication because he understands that that's what you have to do. You have to get your selling proposition right and get it to your target market in the way they want to receive the information. And always, always, always market to your customers first and encourage referrals. This is a tried and true method, and your current customers do appreciate being marketed to and thanked and recognized and encouraged for referrals. Word of caution. You may have to do some new promotion strategies. Maybe maybe you're doing email marketing, or maybe you're sending out a newsletter. But you want to consider the customers and what the frequency and media vehicle should be. I know I'm sure many of you are on a business's email list and you feel like you get blasted every single day with something. Well, that's maybe a little bit too frequent for that type of business. But make sure you also, in your messages, promote your services and practices that you're doing, that you've got safety procedures, effortless purchasing options, whatever those are, and tell people what you're doing and promote those things. And again, that promotion frequency in the media vehicle is really, really important. And what do I mean by media vehicle? How are your customers getting their media messages? How are they getting their promotion messages? Do you know who your target market really is and how they get media? And again, that's where some of our consultants at the SBDC can also help you work through that. And also, if you don't know much about social media, we've got a social media and digital marketing expert. We can help you through those strategies and things like that. So you can get the assistance that you need at no cost. That's the great thing about the Small Business Development Center. Joe had mentioned financing and those some of the other things that we do. We are doing a lot of that right now, and looking at people's financial structure and helping them do some restructuring, or helping them with their budgets, their cash flow, and certainly helping them identify sources of funding and how to go about getting that funding with funding proposals and loan packages and things like that. And as I said earlier, while we are helping a lot of our businesses reimagine their businesses model and helping them pivot and try to get back to business perhaps in a new way, we've also got some very, very brave and courageous entrepreneurs out there absolutely saying, I want to open a business. I know it's the middle of the pandemic, but it's a great time to open a business. And we're actually getting some of them open. So a little more difficult with that, but it is happening. Last slide, please. And I always put my information on the first slide and the last slide so that you all have that. But please feel free to email me. I'm best by email. And there's my phone number there as well. But do feel free to reach out to the Small Business Development Center, because we can assist you with a lot of the dilemmas that you're in. And we're always a really good sounding board for ideas or strategies. And we do a lot of what I call business therapy. Whenever there's a crisis, we do business therapy, talk you off the ledge. The sun will come out tomorrow. So with that, I thank you and be glad to take any questions. And we also have some questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. That was terrific.
Yes, thank you, Carmen. I have a couple of questions for you, if that's okay. There's nothing in our chat and our Q&A right now, but we're encouraging the attendees to please enter your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So Carmen, one of your areas of expertise is financial management.
Right.
And I wanted to know if you could share some financial management strategies right now for those who are in the webinar with us.
Yes, couple of things. Might go without saying, but one of the things we do with businesses is help them just absolutely pour over their operational expenses at this point. So where can they be more efficient? Mm-hmm. And this is just something you would do in normal times anyway, Joe, because businesses often don't realize that while getting more sales and revenues may make them more profitable, it doesn't always do that because their operational expenses may be out of whack. One of the stranger things that I've heard recently is a business owner trying to keep everybody on payroll with health insurance, and yet they don't really want to come to work because they're scared.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, and you really don't have any business either, so why are you keeping all those people on payroll? So sometimes it's a matter of just having a real happy, if the owner will get together with someone that's objective, like an SBDC consultant, we can walk them through those operational strategies to see what can be trimmed, if anything. And then the other thing we look at is how are they, what is the structure on their balance sheet? You know, are they structured properly? So many of our business owners initially did not structure their businesses properly. Like for instance, they're using a line of credit when it should have been a permanent loan. And you know, things like that. So we take a long look at things like that. Of, are they using the right financing vehicle for the right purchases, for the right things? So we take a look at those sorts of things as well. And then we also help them look at if they need to restructure some debt. We look at ways they might be able to do that and give them some guidance on how to do that. I know that's one of the top things that people are asking us for right now. What am I going to do with all this debt? So we'll take a look at the debt and give them some guidelines on how to go about restructuring it, who they need to talk to, you know, what they need to do about it. Because the last thing we want is for our business owners to make decisions based on their own assumptions and not have the right information about how to go about doing something like that. So that gives you a couple of examples of what we try to do with that.
Okay, thanks for that. And I appreciate your mentioning the restructuring of the debt that was discussed earlier. One thing I would like to share with the audience, for those of you who had or who have SBA loans, one of the things that we did for those, they got a new loan, is they were given a year before they had to start paying. And then if they had an existing loan, then all of their payments were deferred until January 1, 2021. So that time is upon us. And then for those who had loans that were deferred, the guarantee loans, and they were deferred until September 2020, now those payments have ended and they may be struggling with, okay, what am I going to do? So we're encouraging them to please take advantage of the assistance that's available from the Small Business Development Center and not just try to go it on your own. We want you to know that through the resources available from SBA, that to reach out to.
Thank you. Yeah. Joanne, for that. The last thing we want anyone to do is go it alone, particularly having the right information. They need the right information, what they're getting into with restructuring debt before they make decisions. If you've made the decision and then you come to me, there's not much I can do after that. So get the facts.
Yeah.
And let's not get them on TikTok. Let's get them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that just popped into my head. But I mean, you need to get the facts from the reliable source.
Yes.
And, trust me, the SBA spends a lot of time and has spent a lot of time in the last 8 months doing a number of trainings just with their assistance providers and with the SBDC to make sure we had the revised information and the up-to-date facts about all of the financial products, including all the disaster loans with the SBA. So thank you for that, Joe. Thank you.
Okay, so another area of expertise that you have is in managing growth. Now, even though we're in the midst of a pandemic, there are some businesses and some industries whose sales have grown, they've increased. So what can you share with us about, effectively managing growth or some mistakes that businesses may make in attempting to manage that growth?
I think two mistakes they make in attempting to manage the growth is they get caught up in the excitement of growing, and they think, wow, this is going to last forever. And those revenues, you know, may be spiking right now, but we're in very strange times. And, Councilman Walker mentioned several businesses that were actually expanding. First thing that popped in my head is, yeah, the wine stores and the places like that. I mean, that was the first thing that popped in my head, because I have talked to some small businesses and some distributors, and they said, oh yeah, their sales are not affected at all. In fact, they're just going gangbusters with their sales. So there are certain businesses that are supplying that sales tax to Jefferson Parish. But, you know, thinking that you're caught up in the excitement of your own growth, thinking it's just going to continue to grow. No, it's going to plateau. And so managing it, it means you also have to plan and, believe it or not, start putting some of that money into a business savings for that rainy day. We have had several rainy days this year. And so one of the things in managing that growth, Joanne, if they have not done so already, is making sure they have set aside a business savings account so that they are putting some of this money into savings to take them through some of the more leaner times. The second mistake they often make is trying to do everything at once and by themselves. So that's another mistake. So we try to work with them on that. And then the third mistake we see a lot is, in their excitement of growth, and I know Teresa will agree with me on that, they rush out to hire employees and don't take the time to really vet and make sure they've got the right person. And those wrong, I don't know that they're wrong hirings, those bad fit hires can really wreak havoc. I see Bo shaking his head, yes. Really wreak havoc on a business. So I would think those three areas, you know, managing the growth means also managing the fact that it's not going to grow forever, and let's set aside the money and not expand so quickly that all of a sudden you're out there, the revenues aren't there, and ta-da, you're stuck. And then try not to go it alone with just yourself, and then take your time and get some help, get some assistance. Business owners are typically sometimes not the best people to really hire the right employees, because they're in love with their business and they want someone else who just is in love with their business and in love with them. So it's really easy to get the wrong, not the right fit for what you need. So I would say those are the three things. So we really work close with them on that. But thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you so much, Carmen. I appreciate it. And I don't see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So Teresa, we're going to move on to the next presenter. Okay, all right, thank you, Carmen. Our next presenter is Bootcamp. And Bootcamp partners with a national network of advisors, advocates, government, and business leaders to help drive growth, tackle major initiatives, and boost efficiency in municipalities. Highly experienced in the structuring and execution of public-private partnerships, Bo has a reputation for driving innovation in municipal utilities, public infrastructure, and economic development for legacy cities. For the last 15 years, Bo has worked with municipal executives in the country to address some of the hardest to solve problems. Bo's work at Faegre Drinker Consulting has included several public-private partnerships, including a restructuring and P3 with Illinois Lottery, work with a private company developing electric vehicle infrastructure, and development of growth strategies for philanthropic advocacy organizations. In 2018, Bo turned his attention to opportunity zones and worked with investment funds, municipalities, and developers on the implementation of the Opportunity Zones programs across the country. This work has included developing city and regional strategies to attract Opportunity Zone funding and projects, as well as working with developers and fund managers to leverage Opportunity Zone funding. Welcome, Bootcamp.
Well, thank you for that introduction. If you can pull up my slides, that'd be great. I thought that was a fantastic presentation that Carmen did with the SBDC at a very practical level about what you can do for recovery. My presentation is going to focus a little bit more on the finance side as opposed to some of those practical applications, and hopefully we'll find some common ground where some of the things that Carmen focused on will be a good complement to what I'm going to discuss. So next slide. You can actually go 2 slides in. The first one's a commercial. Joanne already gave me a great commercial. You can go to the next slide. What's going on in the world? Next slide. So I started with trying to kind of put in the context of where we are. You as small business operators know this, but we've gone from a health crisis to a liquidity crisis, meaning difficulty of actually getting access to capital out of banks, which is turning into a solvency crisis, meaning a lot of these small businesses are in fact going bankrupt because they don't have customers, they can't get access to capital, and they're left without enough cash flow to make it through the day. And we think in particular, certain industries have been more impacted than others. Hospitality, particularly in Louisiana, which is a major industry, both for direct and indirect employment. Over 50% of the losses that have occurred in jobs have been specifically in this area. And there's not been yet the coordinated effort to try to address this. But we believe that those businesses who make it through this process actually will benefit from a rebound ultimately. And so figuring out how to make it through this process is a key component to what we think is the longevity of a lot of these. Next slide. So where are we in the stage of response? There really are 5 stages of the response to the pandemic. The health crisis response, which is still ongoing, and the employment triage, which many of you as small business operators are experiencing directly. Right now, you've gone through probably in your phase 1 where you had to downsize. Some of you have rehired and are now considering how you deal with your phase 2. And that takes us to the local stimulus plan. And in each market, the plan of how to address what the needs are for small businesses is very different. Unfortunately, we've yet to coordinate those local plans with a federal plan, but hopefully that's going to be the next step. And the recovery kind of being the next step is when those 2 aspects are coordinated so that you get to a point where the impact, both positive in terms of the recovery efforts, but also negative in terms of the the decline in the economy, are both realized at the municipal level. Depending on which municipal entity you're talking about, where you are in that red box is a very different place. I'm not surprised by Jefferson Parish's description of where they are in terms of revenue, largely because Lakeside Mall is an anomaly of malls in the United States. Most malls are dying, Lakeside Mall is not. And as a result of that, and the fact that people have had to shop to do a lot more at home as opposed to go other places, they've been able to keep their revenue from sales tax. But when you go to places where sales tax is not as strong, which is typically in more rural communities or more urban communities that are dominated by industrial, commercial taxes or residential taxes, that impact has been yet to be fully realized. And so there's a lot of planning that has to be done. Next slide. I'm going to go through some of these quickly, but this is just to kind of give you a high-level sense of at least my take on the world, which is cities are preparing for a new normal, and there are 5 aspects of that. There's a retreat in globalization and travel shifting patterns, both of which I think help local businesses in Louisiana because there's such a need for both tourism, but there's also an acyclical demand that derives from the military bases, the hospitals, the educational institutions that are in the area. That's a benefit for small businesses that you want to figure out how to leverage. But there's going to be a movement for the next couple of years of people traveling locally in order to go on vacation as opposed to going overseas. There's going to be a new normal in terms of personal interaction, and Carmen mentioned a lot of this. there's going to be a need for every business to rethink food safety, worker safety, customer and client safety, crowd management, expectations in general of how people interact. And that will actually lead to having to rethink what the customer experience is when I go and shop or use your service. And so it's more than just, do you sanitize? It's a rethinking altogether of how you might structure your business. So the comment that was made earlier by the councilman about the fact that he doesn't have a drive-through window, that ends up becoming a really important aspect when you're thinking about recovery. As if I am going to raise money, whether it be debt or equity, how am I going to use those funds and to what end? And instead installing a drive-through window, for example, figuring out how much space I might want to retake of my parking lot in order to create outdoor dining space. If you're a restaurant or other patronage area, those are going to be important aspects of this. In terms of what's going to happen going forward too, public money is going to lead a lot of investment. I mentioned about real estate because most of these small businesses, you either are leaseors of property and so are dealing with landlords who are having to think really critically about their situation, or you may own property yourself, which ends up being both an asset but a liability that you have to deal with. And so really becoming very cognizant of how the public sector is going to be making its investments to support growth in the future is really important. And then lastly, municipalities are really rethinking their investments. Do they make greater investments, for example, in things like public transit? And for a lot of small businesses, one of the things that they've learned through this process is less than 100% public transportation has led to a significant number of their employees actually not being able to come to work. And because the public transportation systems have been so dependent on ridership, which has always been tenuous and has been almost non-existent to a large extent for the last 7 or 8 months, a lot of those public transportation systems are under significant distress and are also starting to make changes and cutbacks in their routes, in their timing, and all of these things have a big impact about where you're located. Maybe what used to be an easy drive for people to get to be in a certain strip mall that may be in the suburb may now become a difficult place for your employees to get to, or vice versa. Next slide. I'm going to skip this slide and go to the next, but what this slide essentially is telling you is that the people who are making investments, you can go to the next slide, people who are making investments right now are starting to move their investments down from what we'll call Class A or the highest level luxury investments to things that are a little bit more value oriented. That actually may serve some small businesses well, because there is a trend also for a lot of communities, and this was mentioned earlier, for people to focus locally, focus on mom and pop stores, focus on places of value, and focus on places that are beacons of the community. And so that there's an opportunity today to appeal to a set of investors that previously may have only been looking for a much better known brand that today might have an appreciation for what you may provide as a small business locally. So how do small businesses fit in? Next slide. So you have been through this process as a small business already, which is the kind of the 3 stages that I characterize we're in. There's a lot of services that come from the SBA and from entities, SBDC, that you can leverage here. But the very first stage for most small businesses was for the first 30 to 45 days in March and April, trying to figure out, do I close right now? Am I in a position based on the liabilities that I already had on the books before the shutdown of COVID? Can I make it any further? And for a lot of businesses, they were already struggling. COVID was kind of the nail in the coffin, and they had to make a decision if I shut down. For those that decided they wanted to fight, they had a limited pool of assets to go after to try to help kind of stave off the need for immediate cash, whether it was the SBA Express loans, the fast track portion of the economic injury disaster loan, and local grants. And there's been a lot of work, particularly in Louisiana, around making sure that there's local funding to support small businesses. But for most businesses, even if they were able to access these funds, it may have been just enough to keep their head above water, but it wasn't enough to take the next step, which is how do I make it through the crisis? And making it through the crisis has dramatically changed. I originally put this presentation together back in April when we were anticipating that, it might take us, 4 or 5 months to figure this out. But we did not anticipate that we'd be having this conversation for a year. I think the realization that this was going to take a lot longer came much later. And so people were figuring out how do they make adjustments to their billing, their staffing. They were aggressively applying for the PPP loans and for the economic disaster loans, SBA 7A loans, all of which were designed to get them through this crisis. For those who were a big difference, and I access to multiple individual small businesses because of the PPP loan was the only reason they were able to stay afloat. The problem what we've had, of course, is that time has gone a lot longer. The PPP originally was supposed to run out in September, and here we are looking at December in the face, and frankly, a need for more PPP and an extension of the existing program. And so now you've got a lot of those folks who've been able to stay afloat so far through the crisis, but they're really staring at another 6 to 9 months. So even with a vaccine that begins its implementation, let's say in December to be optimistic, by the time you're able to get to a critical mark of the 330 million people that live in the United States, many of whom may have to take 2 doses of this as opposed to 1, and cycle through this in priority, you're really looking at summer, most likely, maybe as early as spring, before you start to see things back to normal. And it's really next fall before things probably really feel the way they did pre-COVID. So that's still a long time that you as a small business need to figure out how to manage. And if you're operating at, as they mentioned, the councilman in Jefferson Parish, 25% of capacity at a bar, 75% capacity at a restaurant, you've got to actually readapt your cost basis to make that at least break even, and do so with anticipation that you're going to do this for the next 6 to 9 months. The third area is the area that I'm going to focus on with a little bit of my presentation, which is, okay, we made it through the first round and we didn't drown. We got through the second round and we struggled and stayed alive until next spring. But I need to actually reemerge the crisis. And what are the things that I have to do? I've made as many of the changes around, the edges that I could to accommodate space and safety concerns and cash and so forth. But in order for me to actually be ready to take my business back to 100%, there's investments that I've got to make. Some big, like potentially putting in a drive-through window, some small, or maybe not so small, rehiring certain people, definitely investments in marketing. And where does that money come from? By the time we get to that stage, most small businesses will have run through any and every grant program that exists at the federal and the state or the local level. You will have run through, in many cases, your own personal savings. And you'll be in a position where if you have not been successful with the banks, it will be even harder to be successful in getting that bank loan. And so I'm going to make some suggestions of what you might do. Go to the next slide, please. So this kind of analysis of where businesses are in the ecosystem. And the way to think of this is at the top line, these are early stage businesses, late stage businesses. So this means businesses who may have just launched recently. You may have launched right before COVID, or you may only be 1 or 2 years old during COVID, whereas late stage businesses may be 7 years, 10 years, or 20-year-old businesses. And then on the scale that goes up and down, the horizontal scale, you have scalable businesses, highly scalable businesses, to limited scalable businesses. And what this is to try to represent is to give you a sense of, from a bank's perspective or a private equity or venture capital perspective or a funder's perspective, how they might see your business in context of making an investment. And what I've tried to do in each of these categories, looking at, for example, the very bottom right-hand corner, which is an early stage, limited scalable business, to say that the sources that they typically would use to fund themselves from debt or from equity are typically either microloans, or from an equity perspective, M&P stands for mom and pop, or themselves, individuals. And as you scale up in terms of scalability, you start to access different types of sources for your funding. So when you get to, for example, the middle scalable businesses that are still early stage, you actually get access to angel funding, to the SBA, maybe your economic development organization, whether that be someplace like JEDCO or NOLA BA or another entity. As you get to highly scalable businesses, you're starting to look at businesses that are like venture capital backed, and they have a different profile. And this is just to give you a sense of what these scales look like. But where you see the green are places that I'm identifying where there's typical gaps. And most of the businesses that are small businesses in the communities really fall into one of these gaps, right? So most of these businesses may be 1 or 2 years old. They are scalable, meaning that they can grow and maybe they can be a $2, $5, or $10 million business, but they're not going to be a $50 million business. And because they're not going to be a $50 million business, they're not going to have access, for example, to venture capital funding. So they're going to have to rely on mom and pop for equity, or they're going to rely on the SBA loans. Some of them are later businesses, so they are not early stage, but they've been around for 10 or 20 years. And they may not grow significantly at all, but they've been fixtures in the communities and are very important businesses. Because they have a longevity, they have relationships with banks because they've been around for a while and they've been sustainable. But the bank product that they typically have often is not as creative as they need for the situation that you're in right now, right? There's often a chance for you to get SBA funding, given your longevity and angel funding, but these still serve as gaps where either there isn't a source that really meets your need, or the product that exists, whether it be equity or debt, is not really the right product for what you need. Next slide. So, I've really defined 4 areas where I think there's an important area of focus. And for those who are listening that are running small businesses, you may fall into one of these 4 areas. And this is my description of what I think your access to capital is, and the types of what an organization, whether it be the Hispanic Chamber, whether it be an economic development organization or CDFI, could help you. So in terms of characterization, for those late stage businesses that have been around in the community for a long time, they're limited in scale, so they may be profitable, but they're not going to grow significantly. They're not going to grow 10 or 20%. These are businesses that are often highly bankable, but they struggle with equity. And one of the things that they actually have to start thinking about is succession. What happens is they want to transfer that business, and they need help often thinking about equity investments or acquisition strategies. The mid-stage businesses, in terms of their time frame, they may be 2 or 5 years old. They're highly scalable, so they're businesses that have the chance to grow. They often will have beginning banking relationships, and they can raise money from a variety of equity sources, but often they still are in need of what I call dequity. Dequity is the combination of the word debt and equity smashed together, because they really need a product that looks and feels like debt, but has the patience of equity. That's not a product that is readily available at a bank today, and it's not a product that's readily available in the investment market, but there are some ways to create structures that might meet that need. Mid-stage businesses that are mid-scalable feel very much like the description I had up front right before, where they need this equity product. But the early stage and scale businesses, one of the things that they struggle with is they often don't have any banking relationship because they're early stage. And so they need help in developing that banking relationship. And they often need to rely on mom and pop equity in order to grow. And so they actually need both banking relationship referrals, in addition to figuring out how they can go to a different source of market for equity. Next slide. So in addition to the needs of trying to identify the gaps of where your financing might exist, there's also a need in this ecosystem around technical assistance. And I won't go through this chart in total, but there are 3 colors, or there are 4 colors here. The colors that are in white, I'll go back to the other slide, please. The colors that are in white really indicate businesses that typically they can always use technical assistance, but they don't have the same gaps in funding and they don't need the same effort. They are highly scalable businesses where there's either venture capital or debt or privately or banks that are really working with them. The color that's purplish, that's at the bottom right-hand corner, those are your very new early businesses, and they often have a strong need for help around financial records, financial reporting, and the types of information that ultimately will make them bankable. And that's an important element as getting to the next step of actually getting access to a bank. The ones that are in the light blue, which kind of all go around the purple one that's at the bottom left-hand corner, they also have a need for financial controls and access to bankers. Whereas the ones that are in the green, which are kind of, if you're angling up to your right, they actually need more sophisticated technical assistance to focus on growth and exit strategies. And so I couple these together because I want you as a small business to think, you know, I actually need more than one thing. In order to get to a place where I find the right product or the right partner that provides me debt or equity, I also need technical assistance to prepare my business to be in a position to accept that funding. Next slide. This is just a rundown, a lot of what we've talked about. For most small businesses, the two blue boxes that are in the middle, the Small Business Administration and the EDA, the Economic Development Association, are the places where you're going to find opportunities for funding, whether it be the Paycheck Protection Plan or PPP, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, SBA 7 loans. And in the case of the EDA, that's often working with your local government to identify grants that may be helpful in one form or another. Some of those grants may be specific to the municipal interests, but in many instances, there's a way to dovetail those directly to some of the private businesses. And so I just want to lay out for you some of the sources to be on the lookout for. Next slide. And you know, Carmen did a great job in going through much of this, and I've mentioned this, so I won't go into more detail, but obviously all of the issues here in terms of the operational notes are key around worker safety, hiring, transportation, healthcare, and a need to prepare and think through the possibility of future outbreaks, right? So even with the pandemic, it's quite possible, just as was the case with things like measles, you know, that there will be future outbreaks that you have to adjust for and plan, at least a plan of action that may not be financial in nature, but at least allows you to have a strategy of how you would approach a future outbreak. Next slide. Go one more slide. So I'm not going to take you through all of this around opportunity zones just for timing perspective. I think many of you have probably heard one or more presentations. Some of you in Louisiana have probably heard me talk about opportunity zones, so I won't go into detail, but suffice it to say, that is a particular source of equity that might solve your quote unquote dequity problems. Go on to the next slide. And the one thing about it I want you to focus on as a small business is what makes it different and potentially interesting for you is not so much the tax deferral, which is the first part of what you get if you make an opportunity zone investment, which means you don't have to pay the taxes on the existing money that you've made in your business as an investor. And it's not so much the tax reduction, it's the tax exclusion. And the reason why that matters is what you as a small business represent for a lot of investors who now have taxable gains that are trying to reduce their tax implication is a chance for them to stay invested in you, not for 1 year or 2 years, but in fact for 10 years. And that 10-year time frame starts to feel like a dequity product. It starts to feel like a form of equity, right? That means that they're taking the same risk in your business that you are, but they are committed to being invested in your business for 10 years, which gives you the kind of runway as an operating business that you need to grow your business and potentially either repurchase that equity or provide a really strong return. Plus that investor is getting the added benefit that any growth in your business over that time, they actually don't have to pay the taxes on that. So the reason I'm talking about opportunity zones is because it is this one product that exists right now that actually exists in a way that provides you the access to that dequity product that many of you as small businesses actually need. Next slide. There are a couple of benefits here. It's not only just that you get the 10-year capital gain benefit, which goes to an investor, meaning that if I, as an investor, have sold stock in a company and made, let's say, $1,000 on that investment and now owe 20% in taxes to the federal government on my gain, I can take my $1,000 and invest it in your operating business and not have to pay that 20% on that gain for as long as I'm invested in your business. And if I stay invested for 5 years, instead of having to pay $200, which is the 20% on my $1,000 gain, I now can reduce that to $180. So I get a reduction in what I owe the federal government, because eventually I do have to pay the federal government on my original gain. I just reduce the amount and I can change the timing. But if my $1,000 investment in your business that I make now in COVID grows to be worth $10,000 because your business has now recovered, you've put in your, express lane, you've put in your drive-through, you've added the space that you need in your parking lot, and now instead of doing, $1 million a year in business, you're doing $5 million a year. Well, the gain between that $1,000 initial investment and my $10,000 value 10 years from now, I don't pay any taxes on that $9,000. That's a big deal, right? And it's a reason for people to actually make an investment. Now, in addition, there's also something called the 1202 small business stock. It's a section in the federal guidelines, which basically allows that if you're invested for at least $5 million, you can take a tax write-off, or you eliminate your taxable gains up to $10 million in value. Both of these kind of work hand. They both are reasons to kind of get some of the investors that are in your space to potentially consider making an investment in you. And you right now actually sit in a place where the value of your business is attractive in many cases to these investors. And because the market has still gone up, despite the fact that we are at levels of health, many people actually have gains today that they will need to figure out how to be smart in terms of their tax liability. Next slide. This is really a description of the OZ investment. I won't go into this other than to say there's a requirement that there is an LLC or a pass-through entity that makes the investment directly into you as a business. There could be some smart ways for you as an individual business owner, even though you already own your business, as you may look to make some additional investments or to change locations or other things, take advantage of opportunity zones yourself. But I would suggest you reach out to your local economic development organization, the SBA, talk to some of the lawyers and accountants in your area to help you work through that. Next slide. And this really just talks about where you are in terms of opportunities. The only thing on this slide that I'll really highlight just for timing is the fact that we are now at a place where some cities, and this is true in Jefferson Parish, who I've been working with, and in New Orleans, there's been this effort in St. Charles Parish and Tangipahoa Parish. Not all of the parishes kind of in Southeast Louisiana, but a lot of them, where they are proactively defining concept areas where they actually are looking to couple multiple investments. And when you are a small business that's in one of these areas, it becomes easier to attract that money, because what the private investor in your individual business knows is that the public entity, whether it's the parish, the state, or the city, along with other private investors, are making investments in and around that space. It reduces the risk for their individual investment and increases the likelihood of value increase in this space. And so I just want you to take advantage of the fact that you may not be in one of these areas, but you very well may be. And if you are, it's a great chance for you to take advantage of it. Likewise, for those businesses that either own real estate or could own real estate, combining both an investment in your operating business along with the real estate can be really compelling. So this might be a time for some of you who don't own your building to take the opportunity to discuss owning your building, bringing in additional investors, that actually give you the chance to combine these two things together. And that may also give you the working capital you need for some of the improvements you need to reopen. And now you've got an asset that sits on your book that can also have some value. This won't be appropriate for everyone who's a small business, but there is a tranche of small businesses out there that can take advantage of this. Next slide. This is a quick slide before we go on to the next. And in fact, you can go on to the next one just for sake of time. But what I'm really trying to communicate here is there are multiple scales of this. You don't think that just because you're not a multi-billion-dollar business that this doesn't apply to you. There is no actual restriction on the size of an investment in opportunity zones in your business. So you could have $500 in capital gains and make that as an investment just as much as you have $50 million, right? So think at your scale and don't be intimidated by kind of what all of the talk sounds like. Now, one of the things you need to assess is there's a cost to setting up all the legal and the accounting things you need to do. And does the investment that you are hoping to receive or an investor is hoping to make sense for you to spend the cost of what it does to set it up? And that's a legitimate and important evaluation that you should do before you go, gung-ho into this. But I would highly encourage that it's worth actually thinking through that issue and not being intimidated by size, because you may need the lot that's right next door to you that's abandoned, and you might be able to buy that lot for $500, and that becomes outdoor space that you use in one form or another. And that investment could be done in the form of an opportunity zone, even though your original business is not an opportunity zone, right? So just as an example. This is one of the last slides, if not the last slide. And this is just a high level overview, but it's to give you a sense of the types of investment strategies, given the nature of your small business, that you could leverage opportunity zones for as a way of generating some of the capital that you may need. So everything in hospitality and retail and entertainment fits in that category, even national franchises. We've actually worked with some folks who are looking to buy Dunkin' Donuts or projects like that, where they want to do it in the guise of an opportunity zone investment. If you lease property and you are about to enter into a new lease, for example, in a location that is within an opportunity zone, the lease itself could be an opportunity zone investment. And so it may be worth you actually paying attention to what the value of that lease is, making that lease into an opportunity zone investment. So at least in terms of the money that you're spending, you get an additional benefit from that. Many companies actually are moving from one location to another in order to take advantage of opportunity zones. We've worked directly with companies who've moved all or some of their assets to do so. That's true for medical districts. It's true also for veteran housing and workforce housing, all types of housing where people are leveraging opportunity zones. I will tell you, for a lot of small businesses, because there's a movement, because of the risk of doing the Class A residential, there's a movement to mixed use property where people are looking more closely at workforce housing and other forms, and doing it where there is some retail or commercial combined, that may turn out to be a strategy for you to consider in terms of both moving to a place where you might be able to get cheaper rent, but also combining that to encourage an investment that allows you to take advantage of opportunity zones. And if you are in a position where you're looking to either expand or sell your business, it's really important for you to give some thought to how you might be able to, as an entrepreneur, take advantage of the gains you have from the business that you may sell, or from think through making an acquisition and how you might. The last bit I'll just touch on is that there are some innovative things that you can leverage opportunity zones for. Clean energy, for example, is one of the things we're talking about with manufacturers who have one or two that they can add on top of their roof. Clean energy, do that in the form of an opportunity zone investment, reduce their day-to-day energy cost for the manufacturing in their plant itself. Vertical farming as an example, where people have actually leveraged and created vertical farms and done so in the guise of an opportunity zone. So I just wanted to leave you with some ideas of what you can do without going too deep in the conversation. And I believe that's the end of my presentation, I think. Yep.
Okay, Bo, thank you so much. That was a lot of, and we appreciate
Yeah.
all that you shared. Of course, me working for SBA, we appreciate your bringing up SBA and the funding that's available from us. So
Always
thank
shout
you
out
so
the
much.
SBA.
So, but what I want to share with those participants is that we don't know what we don't know. So the way to know what we don't know is to ask questions. So please don't hesitate to put your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat. And just before Teresa comes back on to handle those questions you may have, I just had a couple of questions for Bo. And I know that for us with SBA, when we look at the opportunity zones, a lot of those opportunity zones overlap with our hub zone.
Hub zones, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned doing things that are more value oriented. And I just wanted to ask you to speak to, and I'll share just briefly, some of the changes that we have made to encourage investing in hub zones is providing that invest in a hub zone, that they enter into a 10-year lease, or they purchase property in a hub zone, and then they apply for hub zone certification, that they'll be able to maintain their hub zone certification for at least 10 years without having to apply for a hub zone certification. And that'll open up the door for them to be able to bid on contracts. So can you speak to the additional value that may be associated with investing in a hub zone that may overlap with an opportunity zone?
Absolutely. So I will. So I have one of my clients, which is actually based in Florida, and we help move them from Alabama. They are a federal contractor, and so I'm going to answer the question. It's not just about hub zone, but it applies to 8A programs too. And one of the things I will encourage a lot of small businesses is, it always feels scary to have to go through all the mechanisms of dealing with governments. But things like hub zones and things like 8A contracting can actually be the buffer that gets you through a crisis like this. And to invest and having to learn takes to be certified and approved and move forward to get some of those loans. This is probably a really good time for you to do that as a small business owner. What I'll tell you on the other side is, this company that I've worked with, they started as an air conditioning company, ended up being certified as an 8A contractor, and have grown in 10 years from $500,000 in revenue to $40 million in revenue. They're so large to be a context, and the hub zone programs work in a fashion. They're not exactly the same, but I share that with you as a small business because it's just the point that Joanne was making with right now, sources of revenue. And what's amazing is, the governments, big and small, federal and local, products all. So the government buys just as much as it buys pencils, just as much as it buys cars, right? And the one thing I'll also say, and it may be a little random, but I'll put together, during the Great Recession in 2008, there's only one place in America that did not have a decline in their economic activity over the course of the Great Recession, and that was the DC metropolitan area. No other place in the country avoided decline. DC is the only place. Housing prices didn't go down. They didn't have major unemployment. None of that stuff happened there. And it's because so much of the business is driven by government contracts. So I would just say, when you're thinking about hub zones and the opportunity zone overlap, what that's an opportunity for you to think about is, purchasing, sales to government entities, and the benefit that comes from the economies of scale of doing that. And it's well worth your time and investment.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And, for those who are on the webinar, he mentioned the 8A program, and that's an area where we can under the Jobs Act, and he mentioned the recession back in 2008, President Obama putting in place the Jobs Act. That was prime opportunity for those firms that we had certified in the 8A program to participate more in the government contracting arena. The government continues, the buildings are there, the troops are there, they all have to be served. Their IT systems still have to be maintained. There's still mitigation that needs to be done. If you're staffing, providing data entry services or anything like that, those things still go on even now in the midst of COVID-19. We're still awarding contracts via the federal government. So look at that, those certifications, as a means of helping you through this crisis. Within the 8A program, we can do sole source contracting. So that means you're not competing against anyone. That's a way of keeping your revenue stream going. You mentioned, and I didn't get this, I have it right, I made my note right. If you could just address, you mentioned readapting your cost basis. And could you elaborate on that? I didn't, my note is not that good. So, and I don't know if anybody else missed it. So could you just kind of elaborate on?
So I didn't go into the details, and Carmen, I thought, did an excellent job hitting a lot of these same points. But essentially what I was acknowledging that is obvious to all of the small businesses listening is, if you're operating at 25% revenue because there's a capacity constraint, whether you set it personally for safety purposes or whether a governmental entity, you know, you can't continue to operate at 100% of your revenue, of your expenses. So if 10 people were working there, you can't keep a full 10 people. You might not be able to go all the way down to 2 or 3, which reflects kind of where your revenue constraint is. But you actually have to think about, how do I restructure my business to accommodate this need? For businesses, that might take on a lot of different tones. Some businesses have actually shifted their business hours to accommodate this, right? So they've not necessarily adjusted the number of people that they hire, but they've changed their business hours and the timing so they could spread folks in a different way. And they've tried to optimize the times when they're open for when they're getting the most traffic so that they can reduce times when people are hired but not doing as much work, right? There may be many ways to adjust your cost basis to reflect what your revenue can. But the point I was just making, and I would refer people back to Carmen's presentation, all of these are things that you need to be considering as you are moving forward in this environment, because the goal is, excuse me, make it out on the other end. You know, here's the positive note for you that have been struggling. Unfortunately, a lot of your peers have not and will not make it, just because the speed at which these businesses have been hit by these issues and the uncertainty that we've gone through for this time period is untenable for a lot of businesses. But for those of you who do make it, right, that means that as they come back, they're going to be people that want to buy products and services. There's an expectation around stimulus and other programs, and people will start to rehire. And in that vein, you're going to be well positioned to take advantage of that growth. Now, you should be thinking about that growth in a 2 or 3 year time period. You shouldn't be thinking about it in a 6 to 18 month time period. But if you stay focused and you think over that time period, you can take advantage of that. And that means your cost basis should always lag from your revenue basis, right? So if you cut your cost basis down to 30% because your revenue basis is only 25%, when your revenue goes up to 50%, you will be tempted, as Carmen already said, to rehire to 50% or greater, trying to anticipate that growth, and you have to resist that effort. You've got to always be lower in your cost basis than what you believe your revenue basis is. That discipline is often difficult to do, but that's one of the things that the SBDC can help with, help you write down a plan and create kind of triggers and for yourself of when I will decide to hire that next new person because I've hit this revenue mark. So that's hopefully a roundabout way of answering your question, but.
Yeah, that was it. And just one more from me. I have more, but I'm just going to ask this one, and then I'll let Teresa take over. But if there's one thing that you could share with the group that they can do to attract an investor, what would that be?
So there's actually more than one thing. Unfortunately, I got to answer the question a little differently.
Okay, well, go ahead.
The biggest difficulty for most of small businesses is that they don't have enough of their information, financial records and data to share with someone to actually have a conversation about an investment. And that's not just for like someone, a mom and pop or a friend, it's also for a bank, right? So part of the reason I mentioned this technical assistance, which people like the SBA and the SBDC do, is that most of these small businesses, they've got to start with a plan. And right now with COVID is a good time, right, to start with a plan of getting your financial records and your financial controls in place so that you can go to a CDFI, you can go to a bank, you can go to high net worth individuals or friends and family and have a discussion about your business. There's no shame in the fact that you may not have the financial records and balance sheet and all that today. That's true for a lot of very successful businesses. The shame is if you just let it persist, right? So you shouldn't be worried about sharing with someone the truth that you haven't really done all the things that you need to do. Take the time that you've got right now, because it's not going to last for much longer, and get your financial records in place and structure yourself a little bit better so that you can actually pitch to businesses. Now, the second part is who do you go to? You know, and for a lot of small businesses, their concern is, well, I don't really know. Who do I go to? I would say that you should create for yourself a little bit of a hierarchy. There are small business places, and this is stuff the SBA and SBDC and your economic development entities can help you with, but there are places that specialize in kind of small micro loans. Start kind of there, right? Start with those people who are used to dealing with startup businesses that are small. Get your financial records in front of them and let them give you feedback. Even when you're not successful getting a loan or getting an equity investment, what you are getting is feedback that actually helps you improve where you are to go to the next level, right? Then I would go to a CDFI and do the same process, which is a financial institution that's kind of community oriented. I would then go to a bank, right? And as I go through that process, that will get you ready to be in front of a potential equity investor. Now, you may end up in the process of just getting used to being in front of people, talking about your business, sharing with them your financials. You may end up walking across, jump the line, and you pitch somebody on an equity investment directly in your business. But if I were going to just be deliberate about it, I would start with kind of those microloan folks, then move to the community-oriented folks, then move to institutional banks, and then move to equity, because you'll get better and better at telling your story. You'll learn more and more about what their requirements are to evaluate your business, and you'll be able to fine-tune all of those things before you're sitting in front of someone who may be much harder to get in front of and harder to convince.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And since you mentioned microloans, of course, that's something that's available from SBA through our micro lenders. We have New Corp and we have Lift Fund, but also True Fund, who offers loans. They have a special program for women-owned small businesses. So we want them to take advantage of that funding that's available from those sources. And True Fund is one of the CDFIs that's
Right.
been very active in supporting the small business community. So Teresa?
No, I am glad you're mentioning them because they're really ahead of the ball. They offer classes in various industries that I think are probably not in the radar, you know, to be qualified.
Yep.
The paperwork, the traction of your business is so important when you're dealing with small lenders or large. It doesn't matter, Bob, well, because it is the only thing that you have to offer that they can see traction. So if you're not keeping up with that, this is a time to get your books in order. A couple of things I wanted to mention. when you're in the human resource business. I know I'm not doing a commercial, but I think a lot of times, Bo, people also forget, and Carmen, that they do have to have a COVID policy to end when COVID ends, because of the changes in insurance and because of the advantage that some may take because you don't have a policy in place. And that has been such a resurfaced, conversation when OSHA started putting guidelines in place and workers' comp, and what do you drop off when you pick off, and so having those policies in place, learning a little bit about, where you stand on that, especially if you're, a provider, if you're in the restaurant, if you have upfront personnel that has to be in that front line all the time, you need to make sure that you have some guidelines on that. And interview when you don't need to hire. That's correct. That's all I do. Yeah, I don't need to, but I'm interviewing. It doesn't matter, because that's how you get the best of the best. And there's nothing more haphazard to a business than to hire last minute. SBD, I admire everyone on this call. I don't believe, Bo, I heard you speak many times, but all these nuggets that sometimes we overlook because we're working in the business, not on the business. So that aerial view gives us, a very good vision of where we need to head. And I've often said, change doesn't always mean growth. So keep in mind on that. I think you made a very good point of that tonight, all three of you. I wanted to bring Alba on and give me a little commercial, Alba, of what's coming up.
All right, there. I was having a little bit of trouble unmuting myself. Hello, everybody. Oh my goodness, this has been such an informative session, and I was in charge of the slides, but at some point I was so immersed in your presentation that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just looking at it like, wow, So, well, like I mentioned before, my name is Alba Huddleston, and I work with the Hispanic Chamber Foundation. I'm the director of their Bilingual Workforce Development Center. And part of these boot camps that we're doing and these workshops are definitely, they definitely came to us because there was a necessity in our community. The Hispanic community was disproportionately hit hard by COVID-19. Of course, we do not just serve the Hispanic community, but small businesses in general. And we do have some really interesting events coming up. Well, as you know, we have the final R3 workshop seminar coming up in December.
It's in December 3rd. It's called, the bootcamp is called Restored. The module will help businesses develop a restoration strategy through long-term access to capital planning and network opportunities. So look forward to that.
Yes, and we also are focusing on health. We have some health webinar scheduled for tomorrow. We are also going to offer your work permit if you are in the United States working with a work permit, and some legal advice. Something that we're super excited about as well is a job fair happening in January. It's going to be an in-person job fair at Lakeside Mall. And Teresa, we hope to have you there. We're going to have some good educational workshops, people wanting to, kickstart the year, hopefully with a new career or a change of career. After that, we are continuing with our computer digital literacy program, and we are with Jefferson Parish School Systems to offer parent digital literacy classes that focus specifically on teaching parents the skills that they need to know to help their children with the virtual classroom. That has proved to be really popular. You'd be surprised how many parents have come to us and have called the Jefferson Parish School System saying, I don't know how to access my kid's classroom. What is Google Classroom? How can I meet the teacher? Where is his homework going? And so we saw a really big necessity in with the Hispanic community and with the parents as a whole. So we are proud to say we're offering computer classes both in English and Spanish, and that is an initiative that we started alongside the Jefferson Parish School System. We're hoping to increase it, to take it to the Orleans Parish School System as well. So if you know anybody struggling with their kids' homework, please send them to me, and I can definitely point them on to some really good resources. So I think that's
wonderful. That is wonderful update, and you can tell that the whole community it's comes together at moments like this, and I can see the excitement to want to lift each other and continue to make businesses grow. I am thrilled to have been here tonight. I miss my dear, amazing president, Mayra Pineda. I know you guys may and may not know she is in Honduras, doing the best that she can to bring that community, lift that community and bring that community some aids. If you're not familiar with her venture that she has, collectively have assistance from Colmex Construction, from CRC, which is amazing people that have come together to make sure that the donations get to the proper people in Honduras. She's there, and I miss her, and I feel very uncomfortable talking to you tonight because I know what thrill this whole boot camp has been for her to put forth. I thank you so much for being here tonight. I thank you for giving up your time to make sure that our community gets to be the best in 2021. I bid you good night, and I hope you have a good night. Oh, please, go ahead.
I'm
Joanne.
sorry, Teresa, I just wanted to add one thing, because we talked about PPP a lot, the Paycheck Protection Program. And just for those who may have a PPP loan, and just to encourage them to make sure that they apply for forgiveness, because if they don't apply for forgiveness, they're not going to get forgiveness. And they have 10 months from the end of their covered period, which would be either the 8 weeks or the 24 weeks, to submit that forgiveness application. If for some reason they had to make a change in their personnel, there was a drop in the number of employees and they had to let someone go, or they dropped their salary, they only have until December 31st, 2020 to correct that. So we've gotten questions, well, what if I wait until January 1st to rehire them or to reinstate their salary? Then you're a day late. Okay, so yeah, so we want them to be mindful of that they should request forgiveness. And if there were changes that were made during their covered period, the period where they had to use the funds, that they reinstate those employees or reinstate their salary by December 31st, so they'll not miss that opportunity to get as much forgiveness as they can. Paycheck program.
Good note. And I also am going to ask you and Carmen to give me a little commercial, as some may not know how to apply for this. Some may not know what documentation they needed to be tracked, and some of them have tracked information. Okay, and say, you know, maybe a couple of places that our audience comfortable to go and get.
So the Treasury website has two notices or frequently asked questions. One was posted on October 7th. The other one was posted on October 13th. Both of those notices or frequently asked questions contain specific information for the borrowers. It is important that they work with their lender, and if they have a CPA, to work with that CPA. Unfortunately, we've become aware that there are some borrowers who, as much training as we did, included independent contractors, those individuals to whom they issued a 1099. Those individuals will not be eligible for forgiveness, but I would direct them to ask questions on Treasury website to have access to their original application, because they'll need to put in the number of employees on their forgiveness application that they had at the time that they submitted that application to their payroll records. That's going to be critical, and checks and receipts that show how they used the funds if it was not for payroll, to demonstrate that they used it for the purposes for which it was intended. So I don't know if Carmen or Bo, anything they would like to add to that. Carmen, did Carmen leave, or
No,
Bo?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, okay.
The only thing I would add to that, Joanne, is that they can contact the SBDC, and we have a couple of our centers that are doing, continuously doing PPP forgiveness webinars, and we would also point them to that. So the training is still ongoing, and because we are a statewide network, we don't all need to be doing the same thing. So it's our webinars. So we've got other centers that are doing PPP forgiveness, and we can certainly point them in that direction. But they can talk to a SBDC consultant, or we can point them to the webinars for them to get the most up-to-date information. But I'm glad you mentioned the questions on the Treasury's website, because that's where we go to get our information as well.
Yeah, that's the most current and up-to-date.
Yeah, it's certainly, and we've been trying always to keep up to date with the constant revisions and changes as well. So
the only thing I would add is not germane to just PPP, but any of these programs where you're receiving effectively grants, receipts. Like, keep all of your information, because you will be required to go through an audit process, because the government's required to go through an audit process. And if they deny you, you're just out of luck, right? So it's really important that you keep those records. So go back and find them right now if you throw them away.
And keep in mind, that even though SBA administered PPP, it wasn't an SBA program. It was a Treasury program. We're the ones who administered it. But in addition to dealing with Treasury guidelines, SBA guidelines, you also need to be aware of the impact that the IRS regulations will have on your 2020 taxes. IRS is not permitting double dipping. That's specified, that was specified early on in some of our frequently asked questions. Just know that there's a lot of assistance out there available to you from the Small Business Development Center, SCORE, Women's Business Resource Centers, the Hispanic Chamber, and of course, SBA and other resources. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate it, the opportunity to participate.
This has truly been a great night, and a large, gigantic size information that we sometimes are so busy and don't stop to realize there's other outlets that we can go to for resources. I am thrilled to tell you that I wish I could continue this, but we're coming to our end. And I thank you again for staying with us tonight, and I'm thrilled to have been a part of this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone. And good night.
Just one final thing for the attendees, just one final thing for the attendees that are present. Once the webinar ends, you will have a short poll that we would very much appreciate that you guys would complete. It's just some feedback so that we know how to improve on what we already have going on. It's not going to take you more than a minute. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. Thank you so much, Ileana. Everyone, good night, and thank you again.
Good night, everyone.
Next time. Bye-bye.